Meeting of the subcommittee, the Communication and Engagement Subcommittee for the Commission on the Future of Public Education. We'll do just a couple pieces of business and then move us on to our agenda. First, we'll just do a roll call. I am Megan Roy. I'm the chair of the commission and a member of the Communications Subcommittee, and I'll just call commission members from the screen. Jay, you're first on my screen.
You're on mute, Jay.
We can't hear you, Jay, although you're not muted. So I suspect that we'll keep going around. Jay Nichols, Vermont Principals Association representative, but we'll keep going through. John Castle, you're next.
Yep. Good morning, everybody. John Castle, Executive Director for the Vermont Rural Education Collaborative.
Oliver?
Oliver Olson, the appointee of the Vermont Independent Schools Association.
Thank you. If Jay comes back on, we will let him introduce himself. We do have 4 members of our Afton Partners team here. I'll introduce them in a second. Commission subcommittee members, are there any amendments to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Jeff, thank you. You might have been on there and I didn't see you on my screen. I'll let you introduce yourself. We just did roll call.
Hi, everybody. Sorry I'm a minute or two late. Just had to finish up something else. Jeff Fannin, Executive Director of Vermont NEA. And
great, thanks.
Thanks for indulging me for my tardiness.
Okay. Jay, do you want to test your audio? Still can't hear you. I'm glad you can hear us. There's also, you could...
Equally true, we're glad we can't hear you, Jay. Just saying. I'm kidding. I'm sorry. I couldn't help. That was low-hanging fruit, Megan.
Hearing no adjustments to the agenda, our agenda is broad. We, just to give a little context for folks who are listening in, and by the way, we will have an opportunity for public comment at the end of today's meeting. But the commission, who had sort of organized its work with a couple of subcommittees for the first portion of our time together, has more recently decided to merge our work and have our conversations as a full commission, with the exception of this subcommittee, because there is so much work to be done on engagement, which is a high priority for the commission. There's a recognition that this committee is really important. And so in preparation for our next full commission meeting, one of the first tasks of our for our partners, and they will talk more about this, but is to help us revise the framework that we had started around communication and engagement. So today's subcommittee and the agenda item on it, which is broad, is to discuss that and to provide input. I also know that there have been some, there continues to be various entities asking for input on this issue, including a recent request for input from the General Assembly. I think that certainly falls under this agenda item. So I think it will come up in our conversation and isn't necessarily its own thing. So very quickly, can I have a motion to approve our subcommittee meeting minutes, which was our last meeting was way back in December on the 10th.
So moved.
Thanks, Oliver. Second.
Second.
Thanks, John. Any discussion or changes that need to be made? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Or abstentions? Okay, hearing none, motion passes. We don't need to do a roll call vote. So,
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Awesome. All right, welcome, Jay. Good timing. So I am really going to very quickly introduce our members of our team from Afton Partners who may also flesh out their introductions themselves, and I'll sort of turn the agenda over to them. They're going to get us started and facilitate our conversation. So Ellen Johnson, Aressa Coley, Maura Keeney, and Kristen Garcia, I have to find your names on the screen, are all members of Afton Partners who are the contractors working with the commission on communication and engagement. And so we are excited to have you here. And I will turn it over maybe to you, Ellen, since you are the unmuted one.
I can't, excuse me, I'm going to chime in. I couldn't chat. The chat is turned off, but I've got to go out and sign a document, get it notarized. And I got to do it right now. So I'll be right back. Don't take that personally, anybody.
Thanks, Jeff. No problem.
Yes, and you are right, Megan. I will go ahead and start sharing my screen and get us started here. All right. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again so much for having us. And we're excited to kick off this work and be with you. So for those of you that are joining us from the public, just a heads up, FYI, that we want feedback from you as well. And so when we get to those points where there is discussion, we do have a QR code that you'll be able to scan to access a survey and provide your feedback. If that gives you trouble, or QR codes just aren't for you, we also, my colleague Kristen is offering up her email, and we would love to hear from you by email as well. So a couple different ways for you all to stay engaged when we get to those conversation points. So with that, let me give an overview here of what we plan to accomplish. So a few things that we're hoping to get through today. One, we want to talk a bit about the sort of an overview of the Commission's draft key messaging. So in just a few moments, I'll turn it over to my colleague Maura, who's going to walk through what that messaging could look like. We want to spend some time also looking at the framework. We've put together sort of a high-level outline of a redesigned communications and engagement framework that we're going to walk you through, answer your questions, see what's missing. And then at the end, we want to talk about a proposal for an equity impact assessment and what that could look like, and answer any questions there as well. So that is the plan for today. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Maura and have her walk through the communications messaging. And Maura, just let me know when you'd like me to advance slides.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Maura Keeney. Yeah, so we can move to the next. As we mentioned, one of the first things we wanted to do was start by putting together some key messages for you all. And these are not meant to script anybody or, this is all we all have to speak, but to put together language that can be helpful when talking with various members of the public in a way that can be more engaging and explaining your role in a way that they understand the value and what and why they want to take part in this. And in our last meeting, we were asking the Commission about how they wanted to be seen and how they wanted to be communicating. And the words here are some of the things that people said they want to be, actionable and fair and thoughtful and inclusive and responsive. This is how they want you all want to be perceived. And we want to make sure we're building trust through this communications and having both a balance of pace and thoughtfulness, and then also getting to some real decisions and inputs. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through some some draft messages. This has come from both reviewing some of the existing materials that we found in the creation of the Commission, as well as just some of our communications expertise on how this might resonate with the community. So first, really starting big picture about the vision and why this matters. And so we've coined this your voice, Vermont's future, and trying to start more high level. And really starting with this sort of vision of imagining a Vermont schools where every teacher has the resources they need, where innovative programs support all students and families, where every learner from early childhood through lifelong development graduates high school ready to thrive, whether that's in college, career, community leadership, and that this isn't just a dream. We're actively working to make this a reality. that our state's on this exciting journey to transform how we educate our children, and we're building a system that's equitable, sustainable, and prepared for tomorrow's challenges. The choices we make today will impact generations of Vermont students and communities. So really starting big picture about, sort of the excitement and the opportunity here before getting into the nitty-gritty about what the commission's role is and what we're doing. So starting with that, so people really get the picture of what the opportunity here is. And then the next slide, going into, okay, that's all fine and good. When what's the commission? And so then into introducing this, that the Commission on the Future of Public Education in Vermont was created by the legislature with a specific mission to bring diverse voices together to shape education policy that works for everyone. And so just really making that clear in a one sentence example definition, but then quickly going into, there's a lot of noise and activities and things happening. And so wanting to make clear to people, what this means. And so starting with this question is this an opportunity to provide input to the government education plan? Yes. And that the commission is committed to bringing different perspectives to the conversation about public education in Vermont. This includes providing a vehicle for Vermonters to share their thoughts and any ideas that are on the table, including the current proposal from the governor. Through meaningful, deep community engagement, we will ensure Vermonters from all walks of life directly inform and shape the governor's education plan. This includes community forums, regional listening sessions, and collaborative workshops where your expertise and lived experiences become central to our planning process. By working together under our guiding principles of equity, quality, sustainability, and affordability, we can make meaningful, lasting policy changes that benefit all Vermonters. And the future of Vermont's education system should reflect the wisdom and priorities of the community it serves. So that's a lot of information. I don't expect everyone would say all of those things at any one point in time, but to have some of this language that we can be using through this. I see a hand. Is it okay if I go through the other two, or do you have a question right now on here?
So
I was
my
actually
question is, yeah, I'm sorry.
Before you ask your question, Jeff, I was actually going to ask you, Ellen, what would be the preferred way? Because I know this will be more of a discussion. And so I don't know if you want to just have clarifying questions right now and then discussion. So I'll defer to you, and then I'm happy to manage the order of hands.
Yeah, if I could just go through the next two, so because there's only 4, and then we can get through all the messages and then see, because I wonder if some of the questions and answers might be covered in the next 2, and then certainly then opening it up for conversation, if that works for folks. Wonderful.
Sounds good.
Great. And then, so the high level role, and then this part is getting into some of those values where we talked about of quality education for every child. I won't read every word on these screens on this. Funding that works for every community, making sure that people understand the funding system that we're working to achieve. Can go to the last one. And then around continuing with the values of balancing state leadership with local strength, of a strong tradition of local control and respecting the importance of community leadership. At the same time, that public education has a state responsibility, so striking that balance. Seeking true equity and action, that different communities have different needs, and then and how you can participate. And this will become more fleshed out as the framework and all of these plans get into place. But right now, there's join us in upcoming public forums, share your thoughts online, or connect with commission members in your area. Okay, now that goes through sort of the arc, and then yes, I'd love to hear any questions, initial reactions, and just a conversation. I see lots of hands here.
Perfect. Jeff, why don't you start, and then Oliver.
Sure. Thank you. So if you go back a slide or two, it's the question of the are we to look at the governor's proposal, or I forget how it was worded.
Yeah.
My only question is really, I mean, our role is much bigger than that, and so I think saying yes, as you do so affirmatively in that one word sentence, gives folks, it could give folks the impression that that's all we're going to do.
It's too narrowly
and that's
defined.
just simply not true. We're going to look at other proposals. The legislature may have some. We may have some of our own. And I think I don't want to give anybody a false impression that we're going to be exclusively looking at that one and only proposal. And not here. I don't want to wordsmith it to death, but I just
No,
don't want
that's
to say
helpful. So we
that.
could certainly broaden that, and that could be an example of the kinds of input that we're gathering, but not make it seem like that's the individual focus there. That's
Thank
helpful
you.
feedback. Yeah.
Oliver and then John.
Yeah, I was going to make the exact same point that Jeff made. So I would, just sort of really sort of underline Jeff's points. We really need to make sure we're not fixated on any one particular proposal. The reality is there are a variety of concepts floating around out there. I do think, just in general, to help sort of ground the conversation and engagement with the public, it will be helpful as some of these concepts start to mature through the legislative process that we can put them out there for some sort of reaction and to solicit public input around. Because I my big fear right now is if we don't have something, and something being more than one thing, by the way, to point people to get feedback, all we're going to hear from people is don't change anything, don't close don't consolidate my district, and we're not going to get more input than that.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Oliver. John?
I guess I have a question. Were you asked to articulate this by the administration?
No, the way this came to be was, in recognizing of trying to explain to the community and to various folks throughout the state what's happening, that it's helpful to have some framing language that's agreed upon, to have some consistency and some clarity around the commission's role and what's occurring. And so having those things sort of internally focused, that people can say, and that would, when we're at community sessions, I imagine there'd be some slides introducing the commission. If we're talking to the media, that there's consistency in how we're talking about the roles and information. So just sort of more of a comms best practice of just having some agreed upon and shared key messages. Again, not to script people and not to put this. And so people would take some of the, put this in your own words on some of these things, but starting with a standard agreed upon platform that's beyond some of the statewide language that can be a little bit more jargony and not necessarily engaging to all the communities we're trying to communicate with.
So
yeah, and
sorry.
John, mostly I just wanted to add to Ellen's comment, to Maura's comment, and two things. One, part of it for me, and I think now this need for clarity is even heightened more, right? Because now there's another player potentially. For me, this is about clarity. And by the way, this is exactly why we want to have this conversation here so that we can massage this. But for me, people are confused. Who's asking the question? Didn't I already go to an input session? What's this plan? Did you guys make the plan? So there needs to be some way, even though I completely agree with what Oliver and Jeff said about that's not our only role. However, people just don't know, frankly. So I think whatever this ultimately ends up saying, for me, it's trying to bring clarity. Why are we now asking for your input? And again, like I said, this just got more complicated because the Speaker of the House is asking for input. So I just wanted to add to that and clarify it's not at all from the administration. I think we as a commission need to figure out a way to make it clear. So I didn't mean to trip over you, John. Keep going.
That's okay. I agree with what you're saying, Megan. I think clearly we've been trying to navigate this for several months, and there's been a lack of clarity and confusion. Even our most recent meeting, people were asking questions or making comments and public comments that were really directed toward the administration and not to the commission. And I think this would further, create, I guess, a question that we're essentially an extension of the administration. But I feel like I really need to press this question. Was Afton directly asked by the secretary to include this language?
No, I don't want to answer for them, but I'm their contact so far. So I'm the only person that they've connected with.
I'm not accusing you, Megan, of anything, but certainly the secretary could have reached out or I don't know.
No, this is a product of reading the materials and have,
Okay.
just
Well,
framing things. So, yeah.
So I'm glad we are addressing this very quickly. When you first read it, it's very striking to me. It's like, did the secretary write this? Because the secretary said on Monday that, there should be the platform that which we should be working from is the governor's proposal. And from that, doing our work, which I obviously strongly disagreed with on Monday. And I even, continue to strongly disagree with that here. And it strikes the appearance that this was orchestrated, that 3 times the governor's education plan is referenced. And so that has to be struck immediately. Yes, there may be a place in this document that we recognize that there are proposals being put forward by the legislature, by the administration, but we cannot give license and we can't I guess amplify the platform of the governor in our work.
Understood. Yeah, we'll make sure to revise that, and I appreciate the call out on that. And some of that, yeah, just trying to be attuned to the conversations out there that these messages are not going to be coming to a blank slate of individuals. So trying to understand sort of where people are going to be hearing this in context of this, but to your point, not narrowly pigeonholing this into that and getting too far into that. We can certainly make that adjustment.
Jay, and then Oliver, and then I'll put myself in the queue.
Okay, so one of my things John already took care of, so I won't elaborate on that. That is around the administration message piece of this. I think that should be included, in some type of opening paragraph, that yes, this is a chance to respond to what the governor and others have put forth, but I would also include other specific examples if I was going to do the governor's example. Secondly, or really for me, firstly, it's really important that you folks understand that the General Assembly created this commission. And I think you know this, but we are really not beholden to the administration or to any one organization. And in fact, members of the commission have different perspectives on what the best path forward is too. And that's okay. That's one of the reasons we want you folks to be here to help us with reaching out to the community in Vermont and making sure that especially the most vulnerable and marginalized citizens have input into this. Secondly, the clarity of message is going to be really, really important. We need to be really tight on that. We want to hear what you Vermonters want for the future of your education. And making it really clear that we're listening to everybody and we're going to try to arrive to a system that hopefully is better for everyone, not just for a few. And then lastly, and maybe this is for later, but I want you to know that there's some people that are coming to a lot of our meetings that are a wealth of information.
Yeah.
Talking about too many. I mean, Mary Gannon's is on this call. She knows as much about vulnerable populations and stuff as anybody I know. Alan is on this conversation. He knows as much about the system in the past in Vermont. And those are resources that we want to make sure that you folks are aware of. And we as a commission can all help you with resources like that. So don't hesitate to ask us about who are some good people to talk to in terms of really understanding Vermont's tradition, Act 60, where all that came about, Act 68, the Brigham decision. Those are all things that we need to keep in mind as we move forward on the work of the commission.
Great. Thank you very much.
Oliver?
Thanks. So I think, one of the big things that we're struggling with as a commission is that, just by design, we're not a dynamic entity, right? We, meet, whatever it is, at most once every 2 weeks. The legislature, on the other hand, is it's in session. It's, they're there 4 days a week with the administration. And we're just never going to be, we're just, no fault of anybody on the commission or the commission itself. It's just the structure. We're just never going to be able to really engage in a meaningful way to match that dynamic.
Yeah.
So the question I have, as I'm thinking about it, and this gets back to the chair's earlier comment about this, this new survey from the speaker as an example, the legislature is going to do what the legislature is going to do. Same with the governor in terms of, doing their own outreach to get sort of input from their constituencies. And I wonder if, if we shift more of our focus into sort of educating and informing,
Mhm.
and synthesizing, right? Because I think one of the challenges is there's a lot of different ideas on the table. Things are moving quickly, and it's all in sort of language that mostly is inaccessible to most lay
Right.
people. And that could be a really powerful role for the commission to
Yep.
help sort of distill that down, synthesize it, and educate and inform in as objective manner as possible, and then sort of let all this other sort of information surveying stuff go on. And I just put that out there as an idea. I'm not wedded to anything. I'm just trying to kind of
Mhm.
find a way forward here.
Thanks. Well, and that's part of the reason of, writing these things down once we see them and getting some sort of clarity, both internally that then can be communicated externally around the space that makes the most sense and feels like the most achievable.
Thanks, Oliver. I put myself in for just a general thought. First, we've been wrestling with this issue since we started, and it's not going to go away anytime soon. And yet we need to move forward on this engagement piece because it's one of our critical pieces, and B, we've maintained that 13 people don't really represent all of Vermont. So my question or thing to think about, and this might also come up later today, but I do think that we somehow need to help. I would offer, we did not create the confusion about our role versus the legislator's role versus the governor's plan, but I think we are an entity that could bring clarity to it. So while I agree that we want to center this as the commission's input, I do think it will be helpful to say, and maybe it is already phrased as a question. Maybe there's multiple things that get phrased as questions, but I also would take that a step further and say, I think informally there are folks who see the commission as a really important voice to provide a response and reaction to the governor's plan. And that isn't our role. I agree with you. And yet at the same time, I think people feel that where do I give my input? At least I can give it here. I think that's why we have active public comment. So it makes me not want to be silent on it. And I don't know how to, I'm going to just use that as a comment and not have a good wordsmith solution to it. But to me, that is why we are trying to engage in this conversation and not be afraid to react to the plan, but also not originate from the plan. And that is kind of an impossible task. So I just wanted to kind of elevate that part of it. I think we have a responsibility to give people a vehicle for providing input. And I also understand that that's hard to do when people then become confused about where the plan came from. So just going to put that out there.
Great. Well, I know we've got a lot more on the agenda, but I appreciate this input, and we will take all this in and revise these messages and get revisions back to you. You also see on here for the public the QR code and link, and as well as an email to share any additional thoughts. I guess before we move on, is there anything else? I certainly heard where we need to be broadening sort of the charge and the scope. Are there any other key things that are missing here that we want to make sure that get into the next version here before we move on to the next topics? And if people want to email those too, that's fine as well.
Are we going to get a copy of what we saw? Because I can't, I got to reflect on it and look at it.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I want to piggyback a little bit what Jay says. It's a little hard to be responding on the fly. I think it would have been helpful if we had had an opportunity to review some of this information prior to this meeting. I would go back to, I think it was the first slide. There were sort of the opening comments about the vision. I really struggle with the way that's all phrased. I think it's a little too, as much as we need to be aspirational and positive about our work, I worry that it's, yet again, more platitudes about all these wonderful things we're going to do. And we already have language in our preliminary findings and the what we presented as a proposal, not a proposal, but a report to the legislature that I think really frames the work and the focus of our work. And so I think that starts to confuse things again. And it's a little bit too much,
Okay.
from my opinion.
Okay. Well, great. Yeah, we can certainly tone some of that down, and I'll look to see some of those messages that you mentioned. And then, yes, we'll make sure you get this, because I appreciate it's difficult to sort of go through slides and be able to give the feedback on there.
Do you have the preliminary report that was sent to the legislature?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Great. I think we can, Ellen, move to the next in the
All
interest of
right.
time.
Just a quick look. You've heard a lot from us, and we are appreciative of your work here. At least I am. As this is not easy. We've got a lot of different perspectives, and
Oh, yeah. No, I was expecting a lot of feedback. So
Okay,
this
good,
is always part of
good.
the process. So no, it's good to put things out there, and that gets people responding, and this works, this doesn't, where's this? Why do you have that? So no, this is exactly active what I was, that's often part of the process, and happy to hear it. So the more feedback we get, the better the document and materials can be, and getting things in a way that the people are actually going to use them and find value in them, because if not, they just sit in a slide deck. So I appreciate everyone's thoughtful thoughts.
Yeah, and folks in Vermont expect me to be difficult. You don't know me, so my apologies. I'm not
Difficult in the least.
Well,
No.
it's not. I don't have any. I certainly support your work, and like Jeff indicated, we appreciate your work, and it's just my general nature to be a little bit challenging at times.
I'm here for it. No, this has all been wonderful.
So I think our follow-up steps will to be make sure that you all get a sort of copy of this. You can, add your comments, and in whatever way you want to provide those back to us. And Maura and team will go ahead and incorporate those edits. And I think we wanted to bring it here first, so you all had a chance to weigh in before we bring it to the full commission and share it with them. So we'll follow up with some instructions on timing on when to get comments to us, and we'll get those revisions turned around and on our way. All right, thank you. All right, so we're gonna move forward and introduce the engagement framework. And before we do that, I just wanted to take us back to the commission meeting that we attended on February 3rd. We asked some questions there about what equitable engagement looked like to you all. And so wanted to summarize that for you here. And so Maura had put some of those words earlier in the slide, but know that you care very much about making sure that diverse groups are represented in this collection process, and that barriers to participation, such as language, geography, scheduling, are all addressed as we do this outreach. And so there were a few priority populations that were named in terms of engagement, and you can see those there on the left. And so that's certainly not an exhaustive list, but that's what came out of that February 3rd meeting. And so we want to make sure that that gets captured, and that those priority populations, that we are doing our best to engage them during this process. And then some specific engagement recommendations also were put forth. So partnering with particular community-based organizations to engage in some trusted outreach. And there were a few, you can see those 3 organizations were named specifically. There are likely more, but we will make sure that that happens as well, that we're involving those trusted voices in the community to help with this engagement. And then balancing some of the scheduling, so day, evening, weekend sessions, as well as in-person versus virtual, just to make sure that access is available to all. Using translation services where needed, to the extent that we were able to offer food or childcare stipends where possible. We will look into those opportunities. We are also very mindful of the pros and cons of using technology, and how that can increase access for some, but also can be a deterrent for others. And so just trying to be aware of that as we're planning out each session. And then, of course, ensuring confidentiality and anonymity where possible to help engender that trust in the folks that are taking the time to provide feedback. So those are some of the recommendations that came out of our conversation with you all on the 3rd, and wanted to reflect that back to you. And all of that was taken and sort of incorporated into what is going to be shared next. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Kristen, who's going to walk through sort of an overarching outline for what a communications and engagement framework might include. So I will move ahead here and turn it over to Kristen.
Thank you, Ellen. Yeah, so as you all know and know what was written, you know what your charge is. The framework is intended to guide commissioners in their engagement efforts in ways that are culturally responsive, equitable, genuine, and welcoming. And its purpose is to ensure that the voices of students, teachers, and key partners who are the least at decision-making tables across the state meaningfully inform the commission's final recommendations to the governor. So what you see in front of you is an outline of the framework, and right now and today is an opportunity, and after today when you've got a chance to look at it and process everything, an opportunity for you to share your feedback so we can strengthen this further and be truly reflective to what you need and want. And so the framework is organized into key sections. So on the left-hand side, you'll see what those sections are. And then on the right-hand side, you'll see their major components. Sections that are marked with an asterisk were shaped by input from February 3rd's commission, all the feedback that Ellen just went over. Yeah, those are all embedded within the outline. So I'll just walk us through each section. The introduction outlines the commission's purpose, its charge. It serves as like the why this framework and the rationale for developing it. And it also provides an overview of the history of public engagement with priority populations. So the communities that, again, were identified as most important to hear from, and communities that you continue to uplift as like who we need to engage. And then the next section is the community engagement goals. So this section defines the commission's goals for community engagement, beginning with the guiding principles that you all have created to anchor this work. And it also clarifies what the desired outcomes, both in terms of information gathered and how engagement is conducted, are for engagement, and who the commission aims to engage to ensure the process is inclusive and representative. Then we go into best practices for community engagement. This section is grounded in research and insights from social justice organizations that do public participatory methods and of inclusive engagement to uplift the needs of communities who are least well served. And this section provides commissioners with a shared understanding of what meaningful community engagement can look like, and clear definitions of key terms and of like buzzwords that are thrown around, such as engagement, equity, and systemic barriers to ensure alignment. And then we get into the practical, like the tangible tools. So this section equips the tools for community engagement, equips commissioners with practical tools to facilitate inclusive and effective engagement, including facilitation methods, the different types, their pros and cons, as they relate to equity and accessibility, recommended engagement metrics to measure success in your engagement, resources for commissioners to reflect on their own mental models, implicit biases. You know, we all come from different walks of life, and as you all mentioned, like you all have a lot of power. So as you're going into communities who have lived experiences different from your own, these are just good resources to have, and they are essential to building trust and rapport with communities, especially. Similarly, for the data collection best practices, to ensure ethical and equitable data collection, this section offers guidance on how to collect and report findings responsibly, strategies for asking open-ended and thoughtful questions that invite honest feedback, and then tangible tools. So like a data equity checklist or registration form templates that outlines like the type of demographic information you're all going to want to collect, and best practices for participant compensation, and things that were also lifted at in the February 3rd commission meeting. And then the final section is a set of process recommendations for the commission as they develop their final deliverable, like their final set of recommendations to the governor. So it outlines how to close the feedback loop with the communities that you've engaged, and provide strategies for sharing preliminary recommendations with them so they can inform them and you can incorporate feedback to to ensure transparency and accountability. Next slide. So similarly to like the last section, we'll have questions at the end of this presentation.
I
But
did
on
just
this-
want to jump in,
Okay.
Kristen, sorry, because I suspect this is why Oliver raised his hand, although it's okay if it's not, we'll come back. But just wanted to be clear for folks on the screen, the commission's job is not to provide recommendations to the governor, it's to provide them to the General Assembly. So might just be a minor, but it's actually a big thing. So I just wanted to make sure that I put that clarity out. That's all.
Oh, no, thank you so much for flagging that. That is, yeah, a small thing that says a different message. So we'll be for sure to change it. Okay, next slide, please. So on this slide, there are examples of community engagement, data collection, and facilitation tools that currently exist, that are frequently used, that can inform and inspire what the tools in this framework can look like. So the first one, we have a racial equity impact assessment by this organization, Race Forward. Essentially, this is a set of tools used to anticipate, assess, and prevent adverse consequences of proposed actions on different racial groups. Another example is the Community Engagement Spectrum by Rosa Gonzalez at Facilitating Power. It's a tool that facilitates community participation in solutions development and decision-making in different ways and at different levels. And then this data equity checklist by We All Count identifies the first 99 choices that can lead to big equity impacts, such as identifying the groups involved in the project, how they can be more involved, and who gets decision-making power. And finally, next slide, please. Thank you. As a reminder, here are your guiding principles that you all have worked on. And we just wanted to see and ensure that because they'll be incorporated in the framework to help guide community engagement, that these are still accurate and still the ways how you want to approach your work. And then the next section is we have more discussion questions. So that's the end, and I'm happy to take any feedback now if you all have any.
Yeah, why don't I can jump back to this slide, because I think I saw some hands originally there. And it looks like Oliver and then Megan.
Yeah, so we could go, actually, it was one slide back, I think. Yeah, so on the priority populations to engage, next to on rural communities, if we could also add in there non-operating districts.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think they oftentimes feel left out.
Yep, we'll make that note. Thank you.
Yep.
Megan?
My, this is more of a comment than a piece of feedback, and I think I just want to elevate it sort of for purposes of the fact that we're in this meeting. I think this is an appreciative comment on this is what it takes to have deep community engagement on a topic. And we've, so when I think, you don't have to click forward, but the different ways that we will analyze, are we gathering input from all of these folks in our communities? And I feel to some extent like the commission is like, oh, there was a listen and learn tour and there's been a survey shared. And as someone who also does things like that when I was a superintendent, so it's not that there's anything wrong with that, but I want to elevate how complicated it is to do this well. And so I don't know, I guess it's like an appreciative compliment, but for purposes of folks who are wondering why this commission has prioritized this part, because I think we've gotten some criticism on choosing to prioritize engagement. This is why it's complicated. And this is why it makes it difficult for us to be nimble given the pace of the legislature. So anyway, I don't know that that is a useful comment. It's certainly not a please change this comment. It's just something that is striking to me.
Thank you. That was really reaffirming. Thank you.
I'm happy to move forward, but also want to give a chance for any clarifying questions or reactions to what we're proposing go into the framework.
I think we'll all just need a little time to review it offline, but otherwise, I think it's a great start.
Do you mind going one more slide down?
This one, Jeff?
No, again, maybe Oliver's point is all the better. If I have a moment, I might be able to find it, and that I'll do it offline. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So yes, obviously these slides will be sent to you. You'll have a chance to sit with it, and we welcome additional feedback. As Kristen said before we move forward, these were the sort of original values that were put forth in terms of the guiding principles in doing this work. So it's equity, quality, sustainability, and affordability. Those showed up in the key messaging as well. And so just wanted to affirm that that is still, those still serve as the guiding principles for this work, as that will set the tone for the framework itself. And again, you'll have more time to provide feedback and think about that offline. Jay.
I was just going to say, we spent a lot of time talking about these three areas, and I, for one, am a strong vote that we adhere to these.
That's what we wanted to hear. That's what we're hoping for. So that sounds great. Others who may have differing opinions, feel free to let us know, send us an email. But similarly, these feel like strong guiding principles to lead this work. I think I'll move us forward unless there are anything, the question that we haven't asked yet, which you may have thoughts on, are these sort of second two on that right-hand column, which are around what specific supports would help you use the tools that are going to be in the framework, and or what barriers might exist to implementing the framework to use it for engagement. Oliver, I see your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think where we could really use your guidance is to the extent that you have developed an appreciation of the, how would I characterize this, interesting dynamic that we find ourselves in. Like how can we, what's the highest and best use of this engagement relative to what's going on in the legislature, right? So we don't want to be duplicating efforts. We want to be relevant. We want to be meaningful. We want to, help inform the general public, educate, and to the extent that it's possible, solicit feedback and, provide that back into the legislative process. But there's this tension that we've been talking about, and I think you're probably starting to, gain an appreciation of, and we could really use, I think that's where I feel like we're probably a little bit stuck right now and could use some guidance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. Any other thoughts on either barriers or what supports you all might need?
I unmuted, but I feel like what I'm going to say is just another version of what Oliver shared. But I was thinking about barriers. The barrier is is frankly the context that we're in. And I guess maybe a slightly different way of asking that is sort of like, what's the best order of operations given the complexity of this type of engagement? Is there something that we should be starting with? I don't know. I think I'm just going to stop talking because I think maybe I'm just saying the same thing that Oliver shared, which is you can't do this well without taking time, and we're just in a funny place as to whether or not if we take too much time, then decisions potentially are being made without this input. So that's all.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like what I'm hearing is that, the purpose for the equity framework is really around sort of how to do equitable engagement. And part of that then, or what I hear some asks for is like how to prioritize that, and what is, I heard Oliver use that sort of highest and best use of time, and who should be talked to first, and some of those recommendations around the literal like rollout of this and the engagement. And so I think those are definitely recommendations that we can incorporate into the framework to support smooth rollout and use of it. Jeff, I see your hand, and then Oliver.
Yeah, I'm this may be a response to Oliver and Megan, and just sort of for me at least, I'm getting comfortable or more comfortable with us taking our time and doing this right. I really am. I know that the governor's got a proposal. The legislature has one or two or three, and they may have 4 or 5 coming up. Who knows? And I'm just getting comfortable with the notion that we are not going to compete with them in trying to roll out proposals and judge their proposals. I think we need to do our work. It's slow work, perhaps. It's deep work. This is what we've engaged you with. And I'm just embracing the slow but methodical march forward to do this work, hopefully, and do it well. And our time will be our time, and so be it. And if others don't like that because their timeline is different, we can't control outside forces, and I don't think we should try.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that. Oliver?
So on one of the very first slides, there was something that I thought we might come back to. I don't know if you can go all the way back. It was like maybe in the agenda.
Okay, I'll keep going. Oh, I wonder if you're thinking about this here.
Yeah, this number 3 here,
Mhm.
again, I just want to make sure we don't let this sit out here. I think it's been said, but I just want to emphasize, like, we don't want to be anchoring all of our efforts on this one proposal because it's just one, and there are many other proposals out there,
Mhm.
and it will be evolving.
Agreed. And that actually might be a good segue to talk about that and sort of what equity impact assessment is and how we were envisioning it sort of advancing the commission's goals in this particular way. So let me jump back, and Aressa, I will, apologies for all the clicking, stand by. All right, Aressa, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Ellen. And thank you all for this discussion. I think this framing is incredibly helpful, particularly in thinking about not just the governor's education transformation proposal, but all of the others that are coming out, and really equipping the commission with tools, strategies, and approaches that allow you all to very nimbly and flexibly and holistically evaluate initiatives along the way that are informed by community voices and lived experiences, but truly anchored in those guiding principles as we think about what Vermont's public education system should be for all. And so today we'd like to introduce an evaluation tool that can support the commission to review any and all proposals related to Vermont's public education system and make recommendations that are anchored in your guiding principles. And the tool that we'd like to explore with you all today is called an equity impact assessment. So equity impact assessments is really a proactive strategy designed to prevent systemic inequities from occurring, and allows groups to anticipate and address unintended consequences before a policy, action, or initiative is enacted. These assessments can be really powerful tools to support decision makers in evaluating how any given proposal may impact different groups of people, particularly those who have historically faced barriers in the public education system. And these dimensions of impact can include, race, geography, socioeconomic status, language access, culture, or any other dimensions that a group is interested in exploring. At its core, an equity impact assessment is a structured set of guiding questions that help examine the equity implications of any policy action or decision, and helps to ensure that those decisions don't unintentionally create or deepen existing inequities. And these questions are designed to prompt groups to take more of a holistic view by exploring the potential benefits, some of the burdens, unintended consequences, and opportunities to maximize positive outcomes while minimizing harm. These assessments are commonly used in government, education, or in other public service sectors during design phases before implementation occurs, but are also often used as just kind of ongoing evaluative tools and mechanisms throughout any systems design and implementation. But I will also add that many states and municipalities have adopted these assessments as formal parts of their policymaking process to ensure that systemic discrimination and disparities are mitigated before they take hold. These assessments are most effective when they are applied before implementation, as it allows groups the opportunity to adjust strategies or improve accessibility and ensure positive outcomes for all communities. As a critical pillar of these assessments is meaningful engagement with communities that ensures that those who are most impacted by a policy or action, like students, families, educators, others that this group has identified, have a voice in shaping the decisions that affect them. And that decision-making is grounded in those lived experiences and the on-the-ground realities that shape policy and programmatic choices. And so if this was something the group was interested in incorporating, in addition to embedding this tool in the Commission's framework to support all aspects of the Commission's work, it could also be used as a lens to review emerging proposed plans and other concepts to inform near-term engagement and recommendations. So this is something that could be embedded as both a long-term and ongoing support mechanism and strategy, but also used to kind of be responsive to emerging proposals. Next slide, please. And I'll come back to questions. We have one more slide, and then just like the prior sections, we will be able to come back to questions if that's okay. Okay. And so I don't want the title to be misleading because we developed this before this conversation, so completely understand that we are not only thinking about this through the lens of Governor Scott's Education Transformation Plan. At the same time, as we think kind of collectively about this Commission's goal of ensuring that Vermont's public education system supports the best outcomes for all learners, which requires effective resourcing to achieve those outcomes, we thought it could be a nice opportunity for the Commission to conduct an equity impact assessment on not just Governor Scott's plan, but legislative proposals and other proposals and emerging concepts that the Commission is interested in evaluating. This process could help inform the community engagement approach, including target populations and regions. It could also help identify key questions and knowledge gaps that the Commission can explore through engagement, and identify any barriers and risks in existing proposals that the Commission can elevate or seek to address within its broader processes and recommendations, while supporting the ultimate goal of really maximizing outcomes for all learners and ensuring they have access to high quality education. That's regardless of those individuals' geographic, income, race, or any type of linguistic backgrounds. So I don't know, I didn't see the order of hands. Does
John should go first.
Okay.
Yep.
John.
Yeah, Mike, it's just a clarifying question. I think it was back to the original slide around the equity impact assessments, which I think is really a helpful framework. Looking at the one on the right-hand side, which is a racial equity impact assessment, are there different frameworks to assess socioeconomic, cultural, linguistic, sexual orientation, or is this essentially the framework that we would be working from?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Thank you. Because I failed to mention this. The beauty of these assessments is they can be adapted to address whatever dimensions of equity a group is interested in exploring. So we wanted to show an example that just gave you a flavor of some of the guiding questions that could be embedded. But for this, we would really align it to Vermont's demography, the various characteristics of different populations and communities, and make sure we're actually capturing all of the different dimensions we want to explore, especially when we think about potential unintended consequences of different policies or actions.
Great, thank you.
Again, I'm not sure if this is a comment or a question. I would just say, so this goes back to, actually go advance a slide if you don't mind. So first, it is absolutely critical, I think, that that any proposal has an equity impact assessment done on it. And we've just had a conversation about how tricky this is with our role and not wanting to ground us in a response to a plan. However, we stand as a commission who has said, we will do this well. And I would say, I am not aware that an equity impact assessment has been done on the governor's proposal. And so while I don't want to ground our work in it, I also think we can be a critical voice that says we shouldn't be thinking about any proposal without doing an assessment. I understand that's a long and slow process. By the way, that is why most states who undertake this work do it over multiple years and not in a single session. And I would even defend ourselves as a commission a little bit. We have until December. So anyway, that's a bit of an editorial aside, but at first, when I read this, I was like, oh, no problem, we'll be changing this title. And we probably will be. But don't we stand as perhaps the only entity that is saying, don't do this until? And so I just don't know what to do with that. And I think, obviously, we are a subcommittee. The whole purpose of today is to inform our conversation with the full commission. But it's just striking to me that someone needs to say that this hasn't been done yet. And if we are the ones suited to do it, then we should. I also know that that is not the only proposal on the table, and so it is a tricky thing, but it just is striking to me that I think this is really critical, so.
Oliver.
So I think just picking up on Megan's comment about the time it takes to do something like this, I guess that would be my question, is how long, does it take? And, so that's the first question. And then if you have a quick answer to that, that'll lead on to a second question.
My answer, I don't think, will provide much more clarity, because I'm going to say it would depend. I will say this, the first part of the evaluation in terms of identifying where the gaps are and identifying which voices or perspectives need to be included to close that gaps, that portion can happen relatively quickly. The portion of the assessment that actually involves engaging those communities to close those gaps, and making sure that those consequences or those unintended consequences are mitigated, or that there are different solutions, would depend on that engagement with communities. However, we think through our contract and our partnership with you all, we have a space to do that through this next phase of our work, which is community engagement. So if this is something you all would be interested in exploring, this could be a nice coupling with, as we're developing the engagement framework to guide your long-term work, how can we use this equity assessment to immediately inform the engagement that will take place this spring?
So I think the challenge we're going to have is really just a practical challenge. Is in a perfect world, we would have 2 or 3 well-defined concrete proposals, and we're then doing this equity assessment on each of those proposals, and that would inform some decision making going forward. The practical reality is that's not the way it's going to work. We have one proposal that's been put on the table. Some would argue that it needs a lot more work to fully flesh it out. That's debatable, but we've got that. We have various other proposals. The reality is whatever passes at the finish line will be different from anything that's been put on the table. So it's difficult. We're essentially dealing with an amorphous beast. And I'm not sure how we can reliably sort of test anything it's like we're doing an equity assessment of a plane that's being built, mid-flight.
That's helpful context, and we can, almost similar to the prioritization conversation in the prior section, we can think about, with the existing timelines and context, what could be an adapted approach to at least have, even if it's a lighter version of this assessment, to empower the commission to make a statement or propose recommendations as things are happening, knowing that things are moving very quickly, but there also needs to be kind of a longer term arm that's moving to continue engaging the community. But really appreciate that, and we'll continue to think through kind of a recommendation or a modified proposal.
What's striking to me about this, and that I think what Oliver described is true, but also well-developed public policy does the analysis while the plane is being built and doesn't try to do the plan until. And I just think about, human-centered policy design. I mean, we can attach all the research-based ways of doing this to it, but there is something to be said for maybe it may be instructive for this commission. And again, this is we are preparing a conversation for the full commission, because that is who makes our recommendations. But it may be useful for the commission to point out that with equity as one of our guiding principles, to make recommendations, either us as a body or the legislature or the agents, the administration, without an impact assessment, that's then not in keeping with our guiding principle. So I guess I'm trying to get at, yes, we're doing this on a plane that's being built in midair. Some would say that's how you're supposed to do it. So I'm not sure, Aressa, how to actually then break that down into here's how you do it. But
I think the challenge is we're not the ones building the plane. That's the challenge.
But I do think, and something else that I think can be helpful about these processes is that they're intended to be kind of cyclic and iterative. So it's almost not even like a one and done, because your public system is always evolving. There's always going to be new initiatives coming in. So it's like, how are you building that base in that evaluation, but the flexible mechanism to be constantly in that evaluation space. Are there any other reactions or recommendations or even clarifying questions on this process? And so it sounds like, but I do want to do a temperature check, that this could be a meaningful process to engage in if we're able to think about the best way to roll this out in the existing context. Is that a fair statement? I'm seeing some nod.
I think it's a fair statement. I see some head nods. I would encourage any member who doesn't think that to say so, because I wouldn't want to go on the 17th and say the subcommittee believes this is really important and then be misspeaking. So obviously we've captured the trickiness of this reality, but I think I'm seeing that this is an important element. So tell me if that is misspeaking.
No, it's important, but I just think we need to be realistic about how this would actually work. And that's where I'm struggling with how we would actually operationalize this.
I have the same struggle. I wonder though if and I don't want to get out ahead of this, but are we affirmatively stating this must be done before recommendations can be made? So in other words, there's the doing of it, and there's the being really clear as a commission that this needs to be done, because that in and of itself is a message that we would be delivering. I don't know if what I said seems like a different thing in my head. I was trying to thread that needle, but I think there's some power in the commission being really affirmative about this. Even if somebody, the legislature or whoever, comes back and says, okay, it's not you who should do it or whatever, but I don't know.
But
John.
it needs to be, what you're saying is it needs to be part of the process. And I agree. And I think that's maybe a better way to sort of frame it.
Yeah, I think this is really an essential tool and framework for the commission's work, and really appreciate folks from Mapton bringing this forward. I guess, the question really becomes, who is involved in the process? Are we essentially making a recommendation that some kind of equity impact assessment needs to occur? Maybe we draft some tools that could be utilized, but is it essentially the legislature that's doing this for their own work? Is it essentially the administration doing it for their own work? Or are we, to some extent, vetting out the administration's plan, the legislature's plan, through our efforts to essentially be the one who is doing the assessment? And I'm kind of conflicted right now, but I think that's sort of the essential question is, yes, we can develop a tool. Yes, we can encourage this to happen, but who really does the process?
Are there thoughts from this subcommittee around who should be involved in that process?
Only my thought is not necessarily an answer, except to say, I think actually that our commission should take up that question and have an answer if we can. So that on the 17th, it's to me, what I think we're recommending to the commission is that this is a critical step in the process. And we need to craft a recommendation around that. And then I think we should have a discussion as a commission about, is our recommendation that we are the body to do it? Or no, we don't think it's us, but it needs to be done. Our recommendation, because we've danced around this as well, could be legislature, you need to tell us to do this, or we've even said that we could tell the legislature what we should do. So we could, anyway, I don't want to, there's probably lots of different versions, but I think the clear recommendation is that this needs to be done. And I'd love to see if the commission can get to a recommendation of how we think it would best be done. If we can't get there, then at minimum, we are going to the legislature in our ongoing updates. We are going back to them and saying, you shouldn't be passing anything without doing this assessment. And either we're then also going to say, and we recommend X, or maybe we won't get that far as a commission. I understand that we speak as a body, and I don't know that we'll speak as a body, but it feels like as a subcommittee, I would split it that way.
Yeah, I think that's it.
I don't know how you articulate that more clearly, but that's, you all are.
Well, we all agree, and the recommendation from the let me play back. The recommendation from the subcommittee is that there should be an equity assessment done of, whatever ends up moving through the legislative process as part of that process. The question then for discussion on the 17th is, do we just make that the recommendation and then leave it to the legislature to decide who does it and what rubric to use? Or do we propose a rubric and then leave it to them to decide who does it? Or do we propose a rubric and suggest that we do it? I'm not sure that the latter would be realistic, but does that make sense?
Jay.
I'm a strong vote for the last option that Oliver put out, that it not be us. I don't think that we're the people that should be trying to do an equity audit.
Just as a matter of practicality, just with the time,
I don't see how we can pull it off.
I agree. But I do, Megan, agree that the commission ought to take up the discussion.
Yeah.
We could be outvoted on that, but
and we could make a recommendation as far as the rubric, right? We could say, if we go back a few slides, the questions that we could, it might be really helpful to put that out there and say, hey, this is what we recommend that you go through as part of your legislative process. – That's feasible.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and I think that the full group is where to have the conversation. There is a part of me that thinks that I guess I'm open to the idea that it could be the commission who does this if our charge is sort of wiped clean and replaced. You know what I mean? Like, part of our trouble is that we're trying to do too many things. We also would need clarity on what is it you are asking us to do this impact assessment on. So I guess I'm more open to the idea that it could be this group. We don't have to decide that part of it here today. I think that's the conversation. I think it's really important that the message be clear that this is an important part of policy development, especially at the magnitude that we're talking about.
Thank you all for this discussion. This is incredibly helpful in thinking about the next steps, or even kind of how we can frame this, support you in framing this to bring to the full commission on the 17th. So with that concludes our kind of engagement with you all for today's meeting. So as follow-ups, we are going to make sure you have kind of all of the materials that we presented today, so you have some more time to review and provide feedback, and we'll also include instructions for kind of the best ways to get feedback to us. We will incorporate everything from this meeting, and then kind of work with Megan to support a presentation for the full commission meeting on the 17th. And based on this outline and your feedback, we'll continue to build out the final framework and expect to have an initial draft by the end of April. Megan, Kristen, Maura, and Ellen, did I miss anything in terms of next steps? Okay, thank you all. We really appreciate being here.
Thank you
Thank you.
all
Yeah.
very
thanks.
much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Appreciate the discussion. Subcommittee, I think I think we'll have I think we will have a useful discussion on the 17th about that. And as has been true in the past, the legislature benefits from summaries of what we've discussed, even if they don't have clear answers for them. So Jeff, really quickly, and then we'll give members of the public a chance to
Yeah, just a very pedestrian question. I missed the meeting on Monday, as you know, but the meeting on the 17th, is it in person or virtual only?
Virtual only, just in
Got it.
keeping with our second meeting of the month is virtual
Just trying to.
cadence.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. So, and then one other logistical piece, it is always challenging to get materials ahead of time when they're being built on the fly. What I will say is we will do what we can to send the pre-read materials to the commission before the 17th. It would probably be closer to the end of next week. You will get these so that you can turn around feedback, but the faster you turn feedback around, the more likely it will be that we could send drafts to the full commission. So. And with that, members of the public, we have some time for public comment. So if you are interested in addressing the subcommittee, please raise your hand or unmute. Mary, I'm going to go ahead and start with you. Other folks, you can continue to raise your hand so that I can get you in the queue.
Great. Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. Yes, I have lots to say, so I'm trying to think about how to prioritize and to just, use my time well. So again, for transparency, a lot of you know this, but I have been doing very similar work to what Afton Partners is talking about, specifically around the community engagement piece for a really long time. And I've actually been in and out of the AOE as a consultant with them since the late 90s. So, and though I live in New Hampshire, Vermont is near and dear to my heart. And the students and the teachers, the diversity coordinators whom I work with and school board members, all the folks who I'm engaged with and who are stakeholders are near and dear to my heart. So just a couple points around this specific work around the engagement with the community. One of the things that, as I have stated at different meetings, that I am still concerned about, which I think for me, and I think for others, is a concern when we think about how to get the input that you're asking for from the communities who, from my perception, voices are missing, that when we look at the faces and the members of the commission and the steering committee, it's pretty clear that we are missing people from a lot of other representative communities in the state. I'm concerned about how Afton will connect with those communities, because part of this work, and I know Afton probably knows this, is it's about building relationship with those communities. So Kristen, I did email you, and I'm happy to give more input if I can be helpful around that. But I would really encourage you, and I'm sure this is something that's on your minds already, is to really find the elders and the leaders in those communities and within those organizations. I mean, there are people in our state, and all of you know this, who have been doing this work for decades and who are in the field of education. So to really find those representative bodies, because I am again concerned that input fatigue across the state is an issue right now, and particularly around this work of education. I always felt that when the AOE decided they wanted to do those listening and learning sessions, that those should have been held back, because I think it's confusing to ask the community to come out again around this body of work. So you're going to have to be really, really clear and succinct about why the input that you're asking for right now is really essential and different from what the AOE was asking. The other thing that I'll say just quickly is I appreciated, oh, actually, one more thing. When I looked at the list on one of the slides, I was trying to follow the slides. A couple of the groups, and this is for Afton, who I think were missing potentially from the list of stakeholder groups who you might be reaching to. I didn't see LGBTQ on that list, and I also didn't see educators, and that might have been inherent in the list that you crafted, but I just wanted to note that. And the other thing is, I just want to, on John's comment about slowing it down, one of the things that I think I'm hearing in the public a lot, and particularly on some different listserv threads that I'm on, is, there's a lot of still resentment about Act 46. So I think it's going to be, again, really important to Afton, for you all to think about, and the commission members to think about, like, how do we engage the public in a way that will make them feel that their voice really matters. And so slowing it down is really important. And I think a lot of the directors that we're getting, I feel like from all different parts of the state, are pushing, and this is happening at the federal level, right? Like asking people to respond to things quickly. And so I really encourage you to take the work slowly and to also be honest about what the limitations are. I think people want the truth and the honesty around that. And the fact is that, when I look at the makeup of the folks from Afton, and I've been on your website, you all have representative diversity that's not really existing on the commission and in the subgroup, in the steering committee. So, again, building trust is going to be really essential, because I can tell you right now, I'm in touch with these groups and folks are just like, yeah, maybe I'll answer that email. So we're going to have to really think well about why we say that their voices matter, and that that you all are really invested in hearing from them. And right now, people just don't feel that way. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thanks, Mary. Alan?
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity to make some comment. My name is Alan Gilbert. I live in Worcester. I've been involved in school education issues in Vermont for 40 years. And I was originally involved in the Brigham decision because my town was one of the plaintiffs. One of the things that I began to realize while I was sitting here listening to the latter part of the conversation is that there are there's some really powerful forces that are swirling around the state's education reconfiguration effort that I think are really not being considered. And to my mind, two of the most powerful of those forces are income and rurality. By rurality, I mean the difference between urban and rural. And really, these two things haven't been discussed directly, but they're really there. There's a tension between rural and urban areas. It's not being addressed directly, but when we talk about closing small rural schools and sending young children to bigger schools away from their town, that's an equity question with real impact to my mind. I think the same thing is true when we have people talk about conflating our 100 plus districts to 5 mega districts. That's an equity impact issue too, I think, because we will very likely see the administrative centers located in urban areas. And that sends a message of where the really important decisions are going to be made. So I think one of the difficulties we're all having, and I see this in the legislature, I see this among groups that I work with, is there are these two tension areas that I think it's difficult for people in Vermont to talk about, but it's really true, and it's dividing us more and more as we try to figure out how to move forward with configuration. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Elizabeth?
Thank you. For full disclosure, I am a representative at the Vermont House of Representatives. I represent Windsor 1. I'm also a school board member. And I just want to quickly say that your suggested impact assessment tool mirrors, and if I could put something in the chat, if it would be all right. We have an impact assessment tool through our state's Office of Racial Equity. Oh, I guess I can't put it in the chat. But Susanna Davis has put one together for our governor's administration. And so you might want to get in, or I suggest you get in touch with her. She was on, or the Office of Racial Equity has been on a list of people who are supposed to be the first tier of community members who, or community engagement, which is a list of, I think, about 20 different individuals or groups that I did not see listed on the plan. So thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth. All right. I don't see any other hands, so appreciate the conversation, appreciate folks who were able to join us, and thank you, Afton. Jeff Fannin, and then we're gonna adjourn.
Yeah, I don't know if our friends from Afton understood what Representative Burrows just said, which is in the authorizing statute, we're obligated to meet with, she said 20, I don't know, I won't argue the number, with a bunch of different outside groups, and that's what she's referencing. Yes. I just want to make sure you understood that.
They have that list.
Got it.
Yes. Yep. Mary, if it's quick.
Yes, it's very quick. Sorry, maybe Elizabeth said that. My link just fell out here. I just want to also bring the attention to you all, and maybe Afton has seen this already. The Office of Racial Equity, which sits in the Agency of Administration for the state, has an equity impact assessment tool. And
yes,
you all could
that is what.
look. Okay, good.
Yep, that's what Elizabeth just shared. Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. We are adjourned. Thanks a lot.